Start.
Go.
Hello, my name is Daniel, and this is a Ways of Knowing interview. And today I'll be talking about how the experiences I have had in Africa and within Southeast Asia have played a role in my development as a person.
How did it develop you as a person?
Well, the vast experiences and encounters I've had in various environments around the world throughout my life are much different from what most people would experience and undergo, and therefore have forged me a unique mental map.
What is the mental map?
Your mental map is the way you perceive the world and how you make connections from one topic to another, and this is highly determined by the elements within your environment or environments which you have been exposed to.
So you're implying that your mental map is determined by your experiences and environment, and therefore people in different environments will undergo different personal developments?
Yes.
So where does this make your mental map unique?
The fact that I have lived within Africa and within Southeast Asia, and therefore have been less exposed to certain racial stereotypes within different races, and therefore have been more exposed to people of black, white, and Oriental peoples with varying characteristics, and this which allowed me to not have any bias based on skin color due to the role of my unconscious. And according to IAT test, that is only a mere 17% of people.
What's the role of the unconscious?
The role of the unconscious is the role the subconscious mind will create attitudes towards certain topics and people, and as a result will affect our subconscious actions or conscious actions and judgment of those people or topics. And as a result, it is really a tool which is used in constructing our mental maps.
How is the role of one's unconscious and one's mental map related in this sense?
Well, the role of the unconscious is determined by stereotypes and ideals that your environment contains, and which you're exposed to, and in the end will result in building up your mental map. With that stereotypical bias and expectations that you have been raised to believe, and in turn will result for your unconscious to make decisions based on those stereotypes that you have been raised to believe.
So the question, to what extent does one's structure of their mental map, and thus the role of their unconscious, is determined by the ideals and beliefs of their environment? Could that be a knowledge issue?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on this knowledge issue?
Well, looking at differences of my background environments, and then that of an average person, and the difference in my IIT result from an average person, I would argue there is a huge correlation.
So is the point that you were trying to bring across is that your mental map is unique and different because the role of your unconscious mind does not cause you to have bias toward those because of their skin color, and this is because of the diverse environments, cultures, and experiences you have been exposed to, which have deluded you from many common stereotypes.
Yes.
How would the role of one's unconscious generally affect their bias toward one based on their skin tone or color?
Generally, the society that an individual has grown up in would play a big role. For example, in Western society, the media is one of the biggest social influences on the unconscious mind of a person in that society. As the media normally portrays dark skin in a negative light, the majority of people within Western society would associate dark skin with negativity.
So the reason you claim to be different is because you have been less exposed to Western society and were not growing up in a society that associated dark skin with bad, and therefore your unconscious mind does not play a role in generating bias against people for that reason.
Exactly.
So to what extent would you say that our environment and experiences alone plays a role in affecting our unconscious bias?
Personally, I would argue that those two factors determine it all. After all, it is your experiences which shape your mental map and what you experience on a day-to-day basis, and that is heavily dependent on your environment and cultural background.
So let me just sum this up once again. The reason you do not judge or hold preference for people with certain skin colors is because the environments you lived in did not expose you to a culture which held any particular skin tone in a certain light. Am I correct?
Even though a lot of advertising in the country that I'm living in may emphasize a preference for a certain skin color, I personally am not affected by that view of the culture that I am in, as I am being exposed to mainly the ideals of an international school, where it is strongly emphasized, usually, that all races are equal. So you are correct. Because of my exposure to many white and black people with varying characteristics, I have formed a mental map in which my unconscious mind commits no bias, unconscious or conscious, based on skin color.
What do you think makes an individual's mental map and the role of their unconscious mind so important?
Well, really, it is important that we are aware of how our environment may have altered our mental map, and thus the role of our unconscious, and how it may lead us to create false assumptions of certain ideas and subjects that may hold us and others back.
Could you give an example?
Well, let's say I'm interviewing someone for a job. Let's say they're black. Let's also say we're in the United States, where blacks are often shown in negative light within the media. The job applicant is an absolutely wonderful candidate for the job. However, as I, the interviewer, have been raised in a society where blacks are shown in a negative light, I overlook his credibility. But not intentionally. Consciously, I know he would be great for the company. My unconscious mind will be thinking gangster, rapist, thug, etc. Thus, it is due to the bias in my mental map committed to the role of my conscience that I made a poor decision in refusing him into the company, which is a waste for the company, and a misfortune for the applicant.
So the argument you are making is that we need to be aware of how our environment may affect the role of our unconscious, based on our culture's ideals, in order to determine how our unconscious mind is determining bias in our mental maps, and therefore may hinder us from making the wisest choices.
You got it.
So how would you recommend to avoid or limit the exposure in our environments may affect our mental maps and the role of our unconscious in order to prevent us to commit harmful bias?
Well, firstly, like you said, we need to be aware of our environment, as it may cause us to commit unconscious bias unconsciously. Once we find those sources of our unconscious bias and find what that bias is towards, we then need to find a way to limit our exposure to those sources, to limit the unconscious bias that we have a potential to commit. That's it.